Karen Holbrook and Deputy James Porter never imagined a routine morning in Pinebrook would spiral into a nightmare that left a town questioning reality. A woman vanished without a trace, and a mystery that would haunt the streets for years. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees that lined the quiet streets of Pinebrook, a town where life usually followed a calm rhythm. The locals valued order, politeness, and the familiar flow of small-town routines. But that sense of calm began to crack the day Karen Holbrook decided she knew better than everyone else. She was a woman who believed rules were for other people, not her. Her white SUV gleamed like a mirror, spotless and impossible to miss. Every morning she drove through town with the same attitude she brought everywhere else: impatience, entitlement, and a belief that authority only applied when it suited her. Karen had a reputation that spread faster than gossip. At the grocery store, she was the woman who demanded to see the manager over the smallest issue. At her workplace, she sent long emails about unfair parking policies. To her, the world existed to accommodate her needs. So when she pulled up to the intersection of Willow and Main one Tuesday morning and saw an officer directing traffic due to road construction, she took it as a personal challenge. The officer, Deputy James Porter, was trying to keep order as construction trucks passed, but Karen didn't like waiting. She tapped her fingers on the steering wheel, scowled at the cars ahead, and finally made a choice that would change everything. She swung open her door, stepped out into the middle of traffic, and began waving her hands, shouting at drivers to move forward as if she were in charge. The line of cars froze. People honked, unsure what was happening. The officer motioned for her to return to her vehicle, but Karen ignored him completely. She stood there in her designer sunglasses, giving orders, pointing at drivers, and complaining about how slow everything was moving. A few people began recording the bizarre scene on their phones. Within seconds, she was yelling over the sound of honking horns, accusing the officer of mishandling the situation, and claiming she knew how to fix traffic better than he did. The chaos lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to draw attention from everyone nearby. The officer eventually guided her back toward her SUV, where she sat behind the wheel, fuming. As she sped off, people could still hear her shouting from inside her car. That night, the first clips appeared online. By morning, they were everywhere. The video's title was simple but devastating, entitled "Karen Thinks She Runs Traffic Stop." Millions watched as she stood in the street, waving her arms like a self-appointed commander, comment sections filled with jokes, anger, and disbelief. For the first time, Karen's behavior wasn't just an annoyance to her neighbors, it was a national spectacle. People across the country were laughing at her. At first, she didn't care. She told herself people were jealous, that the internet would forget her in a few days. But Pinebrook was a small town and word spread quickly. The whispers followed her everywhere, at the gas station, the post office, the grocery store. She could feel eyes on her, hear quiet laughter behind her back. What began as an ordinary traffic delay had transformed her into the town's unwanted celebrity. Beneath the surface of that humiliation, something more dangerous was already taking shape. The video spread across the internet like a wildfire no one could stop. Within hours, every social media platform was filled with clips, memes, and comments mocking Karen Holbrook. People edited the footage with music, added flashing lights, and even created fake movie trailers about her so-called power trip. News channels picked up the story, and soon she became a symbol of arrogance and entitlement. Strangers who had never met her discussed her as if they knew her personally. For most people, it was entertainment. For Karen, it was humiliation she couldn't escape. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Friends stopped replying to her messages, and her boss called her into the office the following week. By then, dozens of complaints had been sent to her workplace, demanding that she be fired for disrespecting law enforcement. The stress wore her down. She deleted her social media accounts, but it was too late. Once something was online, it never truly disappeared. Then the messages started. At first, they were simple insults sent from anonymous accounts. people calling her names, telling her she deserved what she got. Soon, they grew darker. Someone found her home address and posted it online. Another sent an email describing the color of her curtains and the kind of car parked in her driveway. Panic began to set in. She installed extra locks on her doors, bought security cameras, and tried to keep to herself. But no matter what she did, the feeling of being watched never went away. It was around this time that the strange packages began to arrive. The first box contained a small plastic traffic cone with a crack running through the middle. No note, no return address. The second package came 2 days later, a broken piece of metal that looked like part of a stop sign. Taped to it was a piece of paper with 4 words written in thick black marker. "You don't run the road." Her hands shook as she read the message. The police told her it was probably a prank, nothing serious. But deep down, she felt something was very wrong. Each night she noticed a car driving slowly past her house. Its headlights would linger a moment longer than normal before disappearing down the road. One evening, her doorbell camera caught a shadowy figure standing at the edge of her lawn. The face was hidden under a hood, but the figure held something long and thin, maybe a signpost, maybe a piece of metal. When the motion light flickered on, the figure vanished into the darkness. Sleep became impossible. Every noise in the night sounded like footsteps. Every car that passed made her heart race. She rarely left her home except for groceries, and even then, she kept her head down, avoiding eye contact. The same people who once laughed at her online now stared at her in person, whispering as she walked by. Karen began to feel trapped in her own life, surrounded by invisible eyes. What had started as a moment of public embarrassment had turned into something far more sinister. Someone out there wasn't just mocking her, they wanted her to pay. Rain fell steadily the night Karen Holbrook disappeared. The storm swept through Pinebrook with heavy winds that rattled windows and sent tree branches tumbling into the streets. Most people stayed home, watching lightning flash across the sky. But at the intersection of Willow and Main, the same place where her viral downfall had begun, her white SUV sat idling in the downpour, lights on, wipers still moving. The driver's door was open. The keys remained in the ignition. Her phone, placed carefully on the dashboard, was still recording when police arrived. The video showed nothing unusual at first, only the sound of rain tapping against the windshield and the steady hum of passing cars. Then, near the end, a faint reflection appeared on the glass, a figure walking toward the car. The camera flickered and went dark. There was no sign of Karen anywhere nearby. Deputy James Porter was the first to arrive on the scene. He recognized the vehicle immediately. The moment he saw her name in the system, the air around him seemed to tighten. What started as a welfare check quickly turned into a full investigation. Officers searched the area for hours, combing through the muddy roadside and nearby woods. They found no footprints, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle. It was as if she had stepped out of the car and vanished into thin air. The next morning, Pinebrook woke to the news. The town that had once laughed at her now whispered in uneasy tones. Some believed she staged her own disappearance to escape the ridicule. Others thought one of her online stalkers had finally found her. Theories spread faster than facts. Reporters swarmed the intersection, filming every inch of the scene. The internet buzzed again, but this time the jokes were gone. People wanted answers. Investigators pulled traffic camera footage from nearby streets. One image caught their attention. A dark sedan driving behind her SUV minutes before she vanished. The license plates had been removed, and the windows were tinted too dark to see inside. That car never appeared on any other camera. It seemed to appear and disappear within a 2-block stretch, like a shadow that followed her only to vanish once she was gone. The search widened to neighboring towns. Helicopters scanned wooded areas, divers searched a nearby river, and volunteers combed through fields. Days passed without progress. Then the clues began to feel less like leads and more like taunts. A few miles from the intersection, a stop sign was found lying flat in the mud. Scratched into the metal were the words, "She doesn't stop anymore." Karen's family begged for privacy as the story took on a life of its own. Old clips resurfaced, and people online speculated about hidden messages in her behavior. The more police looked, the less they understood. Every lead ended where it began, at that intersection. As the stormy night replayed in their minds, one thought haunted everyone involved. The same place where Karen had once tried to control traffic had now swallowed her whole. Weeks passed, and Karen Holbrook remained missing. The investigation had slowed, leaving Pinebrook residents uneasy. The quiet town that once laughed at her antics now felt haunted. Deputy James Porter refused to give up, studying every detail of her disappearance, determined to uncover the truth. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, in the most ordinary of places, an online forum dedicated to her viral video. Among countless posts mocking her behavior, one account stood out. It wasn't filled with jokes or insults. It was meticulous, almost obsessive. The user had collected screenshots of Karen's social media posts, her daily routines, and even photographs of her home. Police traced the account to a man named Eric Sloan, a former tow truck driver who had lost his job months before Karen's viral incident. She had publicly complained about his company online, humiliating him in front of his co-workers and the public. He had vanished from social media after the complaints, quietly disappearing from the public eye. But now, evidence suggested he had been following Karen closely, watching her every move. Eric's property was small and unassuming, tucked behind rows of overgrown bushes at the edge of town. Officers arrived cautiously, expecting confrontation. Inside, the house seemed ordinary at first glance. But as they searched, a chilling pattern emerged. Photographs of Karen lined the walls, each time stamped to the exact day and time she had posted updates online. Security camera footage captured her comings and goings from her home. Hidden beneath floorboards were pieces of metal and plastic, fragments of an SUV eerily similar to Karen's white vehicle. Among the debris was a stop sign, bent and scarred, engraved with the words, "She finally stopped." Despite the damning evidence, Karen was nowhere to be found. There were no signs of struggle, no personal belongings, no indication of where she might have gone. Eric Sloan remained silent when questioned, his eyes cold and unreadable. His house seemed more like a shrine than a residence, a collection of carefully gathered proof that someone had been following her life with painstaking attention. Investigators reviewed Eric's movements over the past few months, discovering that the dark sedan seen trailing Karen matched a vehicle registered to an acquaintance of his. Every lead seemed to circle back to him, yet the pieces of the puzzle refused to fit neatly together. The more they uncovered, the more questions arose. How had Karen vanished without leaving a trace? Had Eric acted alone, or was someone else involved? And most unsettling of all, was Karen still alive? The town itself was on edge. People avoided the streets where she had been last seen. Rumors spread that strange figures had been seen near the intersection late at night, lingering as if waiting for something. The fear that had begun with online threats had grown into a tangible presence, shadowing the town like a storm cloud that refused to break. Even with the mounting evidence against Eric, the mystery deepened. The timeline suggested that he had orchestrated every detail carefully, but the absence of Karen left everyone unsettled. Nothing about her disappearance was straightforward. It became clear that someone had been planning this far longer than anyone had realized, and that the events leading up to her vanishing were only the beginning of a far more intricate story. Months passed, and Karen Holbrook's disappearance became one of Pinebrook's most chilling mysteries. The town had begun to settle into an uneasy routine, with people whispering about her in hushed tones whenever they passed the intersection where it all began. The investigation had stalled, leaving more questions than answers. Then, one evening, a new video appeared on a private online forum, its origin untraceable. It was grainy and dark, filmed in a dimly lit room, but unmistakably showed Karen sitting on a chair. She looked exhausted, her hair unkempt, her hands trembling slightly as she held a pen and notepad. Behind her, dozens of road signs were stacked haphazardly against the wall, each with markings, scratches, or words scribbled across them. The video offered no sound, no clues about the person filming it. Karen appeared calm but deliberate, slowly writing phrases on the notepad. "It's not what it seems." At one point, she picked up a stop sign and held it close, revealing the words carved deeply into the metal. "He didn't kidnap me." Every movement was precise, as if she were sending a message to someone who would understand it. Forensic experts who examined the footage noted that the timestamps suggested it had been recorded months earlier, before her SUV was even found abandoned at the intersection. The revelation sparked a new line of investigation. Officers retraced her last known movements and revisited Eric Sloane's property, only to find the warehouse where the signs and video appeared abandoned. Dust covered the floor, and the faint smell of rust and decay lingered in the air. There was no evidence of Karen herself, only her fingerprints on several signs and the chair she had once occupied. Every trace suggested she had been taken or moved with care, but by whom remained a mystery. The strange part of the case was the planning. Every element, from the tracking of her routines to the careful preservation of evidence, pointed to a mind that had orchestrated it all far in advance. Whoever had control over Karen's movements had also manipulated perceptions, creating confusion that even the police could not easily unravel. The videos, the signs, the packages, everything was a calculated message meant to mislead, intimidate, or communicate without words. Speculation ran rampant. Some theorized that Karen had staged her own disappearance to regain control over a situation that had spiraled out of her hands. Others believed she had been forced into some unknown arrangement, coerced by someone whose reach extended far beyond Pinebrook. Even the locals who had once mocked her began to fear her name, associating it with the mysterious presence that seemed to linger over the town. The intersection where it all began became a silent monument. Drivers slowed as they passed, glancing nervously at the spot where her SUV had once idled, where a shadow had been seen moving in the rain. Occasionally, residents swore they saw a white vehicle waiting at the light, engine running, the driver unseen. Whether it was Karen, someone impersonating her, or a trick of the night, no one could say for certain. The story had ended without closure, leaving the town haunted by questions and the sense that Karen Holbrook's influence had not vanished with her presence, but had seeped into the streets themselves, where it waited silently for the next moment to resurface.